Hey, welcome to the school committee meeting.
Recording in progress.
Apologies for being late again. So we ask if people can, we actually stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be followed by the national anthem, which will be sung by the Grafton Street 5th and 6th grade chorus.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Stemple. I'm a music teacher at Grafton Street Elementary School here in lovely Worcester. It gives me great pleasure to introduce not only the 5th and 6th grade chorus, but our brand new principal, Mrs. Sarah Hebert.
Okay. We're going to start with our school pledge first. You guys ready?
And now, please remain standing as we do the Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem. And as a little tradition that we started with, and I should acknowledge our first principal, Mr. Tom Toney, as well, who is here with us. We like to do a little "This Land Is Your Land."
Nice job and good luck on your Six Flag fundraiser. We'll see. Okay. Oh, are the parents here too? Again, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And apologies again. So. Okay. Yep. We're going to do a roll call.
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Here.
Here. Okay, we're going to do our consent agenda. There's going to be the motions to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? So ordered. Then we are on items, okay, we'll wait for the superintendent to come back, maybe. Okay. Okay, let's go to the public petition. I think, Ms. Verdia, I think you have something you want to discuss on the donation of sick days?
Do I have to come around?
I can push that up, yeah.
I got it.
Just your name and city of residence?
All right. Good evening. I'm Melissa Verdier, 37 Dixfield Road, Worcester, Mass. And I'm the president of the EAW. I'm here tonight to petition on behalf of 3 educators. As I have stated many times in the past, we have been using the sick bank, but until the contracts are finished and the sick bank language has changed, there are some issues that have come up for members that have caused them to need donated days. So we have a teacher at Chandler Magnet, a teacher at South High, and a therapy assistant at Norback Elementary. The therapy assistant has been out of days since March 31st, and we're hoping to go retroactive for those days.
Okay, so we're going to send that to governance for a hearing, all 3. And I think we usually put a motion on to continue until that hearing. Is that what we do? Okay, Ms. McCullough?
Thank you. Through the chair, I was just actually going to ask if we could make a motion to cover the person that is out of days until that governance meeting, if that's
Yep.
agreeable to the committee.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. All those in favor? Opposed? So ordered. Anybody else want to speak? Okay. Oh, do you want to speak again? Okay.
Sorry. So Melissa Verdier, Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm actually speaking to 392, and I am in support of this, and that is to look at alternative field trips. It says arrange for alternative LEAP trip in lieu of the current trip to Old Sturbridge Village. I am fully in favor of this based on everything we have been through this year. And I just want to say on a personal note, I was very excited to actually be able to go on a field trip with one of my kids this year, and it turned out to be Old Sturbridge Village, so I had to rescind my chaperoning skills because I don't approve.
Okay. Okay, so we'll close that part of the meeting. We can go for items for reconsideration. I believe these are both the same. So we have Member Clancy, Member Novick, the report of Standing Committee on Government's Employees Issues that met virtually in person on Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 at 5 p.m. was approved by the school committee on March 16th, 2023. So that's F. Both items on F. So remember, the vote is for reconsideration. Roll call.
Member Clancy? Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Clower?
Yes.
Member Millian?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Perry?
Yes. Okay, so Member Clancy is not here tonight, so Member Novick also filed a petition. And Member Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe that the intent, at least on the part of Member Clancy, was simply to send the dress code back to governance. So I think we can probably just
So the
do
motion
that.
is to send the dress code part of this meeting back to governance. All those in favor? Opposed? So ordered.
And then my concern, as I noted in the backup, was regarding the process in terms of the strategic plan. And having discussed this with the superintendent, I believe that she has some information for us in terms of proposed process moving forward.
Madam Superintendent?
Yes, through the chair. So we're passing out a flow chart, kind of. I guess we're calling it communication and decision-making flow chart to make sure that we're all understanding what is being proposed in terms of how this, how the strategic plan will be designed. So I want to start us off on the top of the chart there, and I want to start us in the center. And so the plan would be that the flow of information would flow through the Standing Committee on Governance and Employee Issues. I'll talk through what the different meetings would be, but just so I can kind of orientate you first to what's in front of you. So the flow of information, again, starts with standing committee governance and employee issues. The governance, we would, at a meeting, the next scheduled governance and employee issues meeting, we would bring a list of names and titles that would make up what would be the strategic plan task force. And at that meeting, the standing committee would then accept, reject, or modify what is brought forward in terms of the list of individuals, and then also from that list, then appoint a chairperson to be the chairperson for the strategic plan task force. Then the strategic plan task force does the work and then brings that work back to standing, where standing would either accept, reject, or modify any recommendations from that task force. And then standing would bring that to the school committee, who then would accept, reject, or modify the recommendations. So the flow of information would flow between the governance and employee issue standing committee to task force and back, and then from standing committee to committee, school committee and back. So that would be the flow of information. The task force would only be making recommendations. The standing committee would accept, reject, or modify, as well as school committee. We are then from there below proposing approximately 9 meetings. First meeting, as I stated, would be with the governance and employee issues standing committee. At that meeting, that first meeting, approve the list of task force names that we would be bringing forward, accept or modify, and appoint the chair. Then from there, 2 to 4 meetings with the task force that would have been approved, and we would work with Hanover to facilitate the meetings. Hanover would not be doing any work outside of this. They are the facilitators of this task force. And the task force, we anticipate, again, 2 to 4 meetings, no, I'm sorry, about 3 meetings, 1 meeting to orientate to the work, another meeting to introduce the themes that come from the existing strategic plan and the themes that came out of the listening and learning tour, and to synthesize those themes. And finally, the task force would draft what we're kind of calling descriptions of the themes. So we've got 11 right now, the existing goals or areas in the existing strategic plan, then the 6 that are coming forward, so that's 11. We need to synthesize those down, and then we need to describe what they are. That would be the role of the task force. Depending on when governance is meeting, we would be going back and forth between governance to share updates, and then governance would bring it at the next scheduled school committee meeting. And again, along the way, we're making recommendations through this task force to the different bodies that make up school committee, and there would be accept, reject, or modify. I'm going to jump down then. So meeting number 5 would be with the standing committee, again, to approve the synthesized themes and descriptions. Depending on timing, that may happen in 1 meeting. That might need to be 2 meetings. All of that gets reported back through governance to school committee. And then we anticipate once school committee, through governance, right, has approved the synthesized themes and descriptions, then it will be time for administration, so an internal group, to work with Hanover to then do a SWOT analysis of where we are as a district. So once the themes are designed, right, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, what's the root cause analysis, getting down to clear goals as they relate to the themes, and then benchmarks for each theme. We anticipate about 3 meetings with Hanover to make those outcomes happen. Then we take that back to governance. They could, again, review, accept, reject, modify the goals and benchmarks, and then that would finally come to school committee. So we think This would take about 9 meetings in total. The most important ones, of course, being the information share back and forth between the task force and the governance, and then they bring that to the school committee. This is what we're recommending in terms of communication and decision-making flow, and the role of Hanover in this, which is to facilitate the meetings, not be the ones who actually develop the themes, nor the benchmarks, nor the descriptions or goals. That would be all done through the task force and the administration.
Okay, it looks very good. I know Member Clancy, who chairs that committee, couldn't be here tonight to present this too, so we will accept this and move on from that. Member Mailman.
Just one question. Are any of these meetings public?
They will.
Are meetings 2 to 4 public? I know obviously the governance committee is public, I get that.
Meaning, can other people come to listen? Absolutely, always.
They won't be
But will we be
posted.
posting it as a public meeting? Is that your question, Member Mailman?
Right, because, yes, that is my question.
So if committee members want to be a part of it, then we would need to post it as a public meeting.
Okay.
The task force itself would be that would be approved by governance. But then if committee wants to come and listen.
In that second group of meetings.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so, okay, thank you for that update. And
I want to make sure I'm seeing some back
get
and
hands
forth.
up? Oh. Member Novak?
No, what I was to do was make the motion to amend the report as just indicated, and then approve to sort of complete the cycle. Just to clarify, I think what the superintendent was saying is that the strategic plan task force has to be a public body, but since what we're trying to do is make sure that we also both outsource that work and also don't run afoul of our own quorum kinds of things, it would be important that if any of us do go to those, that we don't in any way participate, but simply listen.
Correct.
Thank you.
As amended, all those in favor, opposed, so ordered. We are on the held items. The first one is to consider a revision to the job description for Chief Human Resource Officer. Member Novak?
Mr. Chair, I would move approval with 3 sort of general amendments. One is we're still struggling a tiny bit with parallel structure, so if we could make it parallel throughout, if we could consistently use Oxford commas throughout, and if we could spell out Worcester Public Schools throughout. Sorry, I write job descriptions as part of my job, so with those 3 amendments, I would move approval.
Okay. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Okay, we are on Member Mailman to consider the endorsement of the Mass Legislative House docket number 485, Senate docket number 1697, an act to improve access, opportunity, and capacity to Massachusetts vocational and technical education. Member Mailman?
So I would like to withdraw this motion, but I would like to make a couple of comments too. I still believe that this has a lot of support at the state level and that Worcester can definitely be beneficiaries of any improved vocational funding at the state level. And that I think a lot, and I think the mayor has mentioned this several times, that we are trying to find every way we can to get a Burncoat school. And if there are potentially, we would have never had a Worcester Tech if we didn't have 90% funding. So if there is a way to think about how we structure our deal for Burncoat, then this is possibly a way forward if it's passed. But I'm going to withdraw it because there are things that need to be corrected. One question that folks were asking that I did ask about, this is a separate pot of money they're trying to get, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So motion to withdraw. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. We're on a report of the superintendent. Support mental health need in strengthening social emotional competencies. Okay. Madam Superintendent.
Yes. So thank you. As the team comes up, I do want to introduce Annie Asolosa, our Chief Academic Support Officer, and Tom Toney, our Administrative Director of Positive Youth Development. I want to thank them for their diligence in pulling this together. As we know, mental health needs for our scholars is a national need as well as a state and local need. And so there is a lot of thought and emotion around it. This is, as thanks to the school committee, this is a new division, and so we've had opportunity to really dig in and take a deeper dive into what we're going to share tonight. So you'll hear our current state. You'll see some data points that might be a little bit alarming to you. I do want to let you know that the data points are what children self-report, so that's really important. This is their perception of the questions that are asked of them. I also want to remind the committee that in November of 2022, there was some change in legislation around alternatives to suspension. And so this, what you're going to see in terms of some data points, show some of those shifts already in our district. And so you'll see less suspension rates than in the past. What we need to continue to improve upon are the alternatives to suspension and teaching new behaviors, so that children's mental health and social emotional needs are flourishing in a positive way. So the team, they'll share what they're doing. There's a lot of work to be done. Both Ms. Asolosa and Mr. Toney started December and January of this school year. So it is a very short amount of time that they've been in these positions, but they will be clarifying where we're at, where we're going, and in addition, some initial structural changes that have recently taken place. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Asolosa. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monarrez. Mr. Chairman, school committee members, we're delighted to be here to present on our scholars' mental health needs and strengthening their social emotional competencies.
So here be some of our outcomes for this meeting will be taking a look at the data to learn where our students are and where they're coming from according to their social and emotional competencies and their mental health needs. We'll also be talking about the desired state, the theory of action, and our action steps to get us to where we need to be. We also talk about some potential fiscal and policy implications on our journey to our desired state.
I'd like to bring us back to our superintendent's goals. What I've done here is I've highlighted the work that falls under the umbrella of the Academic Supports Division, and so we're tasked with moving the needle in these areas. So we use panorama education to assess our scholars' social emotional competencies on 4 dimensions. This was the first year we actually added grades 3 through 5. Just to give you some idea on the types of questions that our scholars see on the survey, for social awareness, how carefully do you listen to other people's points of views, and how much do you care about other people's feelings? Nearly 7 out of our 10 scholars appear to be socially aware. For growth mindset, in school, how possible is it for you to change how easily you give up? About 6 out of our 10 scholars have a growth mindset. Emotion regulation, when things go wrong for you, how calm are you able to stay? Less than half of our scholars report they can self-regulate. And for self-efficacy, when complicated ideas are presented in class, how confident are you that you understand them? About half of our scholars have self-efficacy beliefs. If you look at this graph, the yellow line, we appear to be moving the needle slowly. Every time our scholars take the survey, it increases steadily. For scholars' growth mindset and emotion regulation, we hold steady at about 50% and 45% respectively. So what it tells us is that we're not making an impact on their belief that while they believe they can accomplish the task, they're not yet convinced that with effort, their ability to accomplish that same task will improve. For emotion regulation, that tells us that they may lack some skills to regulate themselves when they feel discomfort. You know, we often hear that catchy phrase, seek discomfort. It's where all the learning and the growing occurs. And so some of our scholars struggle. When they're a little bit uncomfortable, rather than pushing through, they give up. And then social awareness, you'll notice we're a little bit up and down. So we need to do a better job in instilling in our scholars the significance of welcoming varying perspectives and experiences. We want them to be flexible thinkers. And so this also opens the door to resolving conflict peacefully when we disagree.
These next couple slides talks about in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. If you take a look at the bottom right-hand graph, you can see that yellow-orange line. We were actually up at the beginning of the school year with our suspensions, and you can see a gradually decrease in our suspensions for the Worcester Public Schools. That comes from some of the legislation that was passed. The state came out with the Rethinking Discipline Initiative, which is designed to assist schools with reducing suspension and expulsion. It also is designed to decrease the disproportionation rates of suspension and expulsion of students with disabilities and students of color. In light of that new initiative, we're looking at discipline more creatively, and we want to continue working with our leaders in schools about alternatives to suspension to help reduce our suspension numbers moving forward.
This slide here is CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and it's administered every other year. Our next administration will be in the fall. You can see this is a 10-year trend on this one slide. Of significance is that females are almost twice as likely to experience a sense of hopelessness and sadness. And so we really need to look at that as a team, like what are we doing differently for females to address that disparity? This stayed true when we took a look at the Department of Public Health survey on the next slide. This is a tailored version of CDC's specifically for our region, and these are solely Worcester Public School results. And so 88% of our middle school scholars took this voluntary survey, while 77 of our high school scholars took the survey. Although our high school numbers appear to be less than the national average, our middle school scholars are exhibiting a significantly increased mental health needs than in prior years. Here you have the triggers that our middle school youth is identifying as the causes for their feelings of hopelessness and sadness, stress being 3 times the leading cause for these feelings. When we look at the next slide, it's important to compare 2019 and 2022 results for our high school scholars. All of the issues causing their feelings of hopelessness and sadness seem to diminish, while stress and anxiety skyrocket, making it 7 times greater than the other triggers.
So this is our desired state. Some key words and phrases are strengthen social and emotional competencies, support, increase sense of belonging, and engaging our caregivers. This is our theory of action, which focuses on strengthening our students socially and emotionally, and supporting their mental health needs. That should, in return, increase our students' sense of belonging and belief that they can successfully develop academically, socially, and emotionally.
So we've seen the panorama data. Our next administration will be in the fall. What are we doing until then to address our scholars' social emotional competencies? We've developed an implementation plan for our newly enhanced MTSS blueprint that includes tiered interventions not only for academic but for behavior and social emotional. We intend to roll this out to staff thoughtfully so that they have sufficient professional learning in order to implement these tiered interventions with intentionality while monitoring scholars' growth on these social emotional competencies. We're also evaluating bullying prevention frameworks, and we intend to adopt one that is restorative in nature. We don't want to be punitive. We need to reteach behavior so that scholars who are exhibiting bullying behaviors can learn to empathize in order to reshape their behavior. Oftentimes we forget that empathy is a learned behavior.
So as we stated before, we talked about our suspensions being down. So the question that we asked ourselves, what are we doing to keep more scholars in school learning and part of their community? So we developed a menu of alternatives to suspension that includes some evidence-based strategies such as conflict resolution, mediation, and restorative practices. All this is to keep our students in school, to hold them accountable for their actions while reshaping their behaviors in school. More to that, we've developed our culture and climate teams. We developed our culture and climate frameworks, and we've begun building with our schools their culture and climate teams to ensure that each school has a warm and welcoming, safe, and inclusive environment will be beneficial to teaching and learning on behalf of our students and families. We want to have these teams in place by the end of the year with a clear mission and vision statement to lead that work, along with looking at capacity challenges and matrix to learn more about the impact these teams can have on the schools.
The only other thing I'll add is that for quite some time, I'm learning that Worcester Public Schools has had the Office of Social Emotional Learning. However, the work that we're facilitating is a bit broader, right? So it's really about culture and climate on behalf of social emotional learning. I challenge us to shift our mindset into thinking more about what the adults are doing to promote a sense of belonging, and more about, providing access and equity to a high quality education, creating a safe, warm, inclusive environment where students can flourish. To that end, we recently made some organizational changes in our division that I'd like to share. So I want to give you a little bit of context and our thought process behind our decision. And I'll also talk a little bit about the role or the work that psychologists and school adjustment counselors facilitate. So when I first started in December, I learned that psychologists didn't fall under special education. It was a model that I had never seen before, but I was intrigued. I was told that, there were some talks about possibly moving them under the special education department. However, I really wanted to learn how it operated the way it stood. About 2 months in, I learned that I didn't believe it was working as intended. And so, when we think about the work that the school psychologists facilitate, generally, work is in a preventative capacity to create the best possible learning environment for our scholars. They identify scholars with behavior challenges, learning differences, and remove roadblocks that interfere with them accessing the curriculum. They're also heavily involved in the identification of disabilities that impact their learning. And so there are 12 disabilities, one being emotional impairment. They're the experts on every single one of those disabilities. They are also an integral part of the IEP team. And they help families understand how their child's disability impacts their learning. And then as far as school adjustment counselors, a number of years back, the American School Counselor Association stepped away from differentiating the roles of guidance and school adjustment counselors because it sort of implied that their role was too narrow. And so today, they're actually called school counselors, right? And they facilitate, the work they facilitate is really to improve scholar success that includes helping our scholars apply academic achievement strategies, manage emotions, and apply interpersonal skills, and also plan post-secondary options. Right now, our guidance counselors fall under the principals, but our school adjustment counselors don't. So being part of a building-based team also gives our school adjustment counselors a stronger sense of community. And right now, some are actually straddling between buildings, and we really want to put them in one building, right? I also learned when I was here that many were plucked from buildings, and so we want to ensure continuity. We want to make sure that they're building relationships with their scholars, with their families, and with their staff in their buildings. So we are in the thick of developing our 3-year strategic plan for health and wellness with stakeholder voice. We have 10 subcommittees hard at work with community partners and staff across the district. We're using CDC's framework, which is whole school, whole community, and whole child, for addressing both physical and mental health needs in schools. The WSEC model is really scholar-centered and emphasizes the role of community in supporting the school, the connections between health and academic achievement, and the importance of evidence-based practices and policies. So we've seen the data on scholars' mental health needs. How are we addressing this? We've contracted with 4 mental health agencies to push in clinicians into our secondary schools, some of our elementary schools, and all of our alternative schools. Despite our efforts to engage community supports, the lack of clinicians is really preventing these agencies from pushing supports into schools. Just a couple. We do have a full-time clinician at Forest Grove with 9 scholars on her caseload, and according to Dr. Matthew Morris, making a huge impact already. We've been going back and forth with another mental health agency as to the contract. However, they have clinicians ready to push in services to our comprehensive high schools. Our 4th agency, servicing our Challenge and Reach scholars, currently has 8 scholars on their caseload. I spoke to Dr. Diggs this morning, and she reported that she is already seeing a positive impact. Once all consents are signed, we're going to push that number of the caseload to 20 after the April break. The other thing I want to mention, when we talk about alternative education, those scholars are some of our most vulnerable. And so what we really want to do is build some functional, productive, and innovative learning approaches to re-engage them. Apart from taking care of their mental health needs and strengthening their social and emotional competencies, we need to make sure that all of our scholars graduate college or career and community ready. And lastly, we have contracted with the Clay Center to provide a high needs assessment of our mental health educational programming to ensure that we have a continuum of services from cradle to career. They're looking at nationwide best practices to consider when supporting scholars in order to reduce anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which may include an on-site emotional support dog.
So, in addition to what Annie has been explaining to us, we've also been working with the Brookline Center of Mental Health to expand the Bridge Resilient Youth in Transition model, which is called the BRIGHT model. The BRIGHT program is already established at Woodland Academy, the elementary school, and the BRIGHT program is designed to support students both academically and socially in a small, separate classroom. It provides the students with strategies to help them return to the classroom and be successful. The Brookline Center of Mental Health has also provided an assessment tool to help us identify schools so we can expand this model throughout the public schools. And then finally, we invited schools to participate in piloting in some of our 4 frameworks listed here on the slideshow. We've had a great response from the schools, and we're excited to learn more about implementing a framework with fidelity with year-round district support.
So we are fully staffed, and we have our new co-directors for family and community engagement, and they are hard at work developing the family engagement framework with stakeholder voice. They're also in the process of auditing our processes and procedures for the Parent Information Center to ensure a seamless enrollment process for our families, and also to make sure that all our scholars and caregivers have access and equity to the structures that we have in place and those that we enhance. We've also hired a wraparound coordinator for our Parent Information Center so that our families have the supports they need in the community. And finally, we're going to be launching targeted caregiver trainings and caregiver academies to educate families on bullying and how to build their self-efficacy. They too can and want to make a difference in their child's life as their child's first teacher. The district plans to provide them that opportunity to learn more on how they can support their child. We're working with the director of school-based health centers and her team to learn how we can expand our health centers, our school-based health centers, in order to provide families with access to health care and dental care. She's also working on providing us with behavior therapists to further address our scholars' mental health needs. Finally, we're looking to acquire a universal online communication tool that our families can access in their native language to learn anything and everything about their child's education, and also the community resources out there and upcoming events. This would be a 2-way communication platform that would really open up the lines of communication among our dedicated staff, our scholars, and our families. So we might have some potential fiscal implications. So we're in the process of identifying a social emotional curriculum that is embedded in teachers' practice. We don't want to add anything to a teacher's plate. We really want it to run parallel with what they're already doing, and while making an impact, a positive impact on scholars' social emotional competencies. As Mr. Tony said, we're piloting evidence-based frameworks in the fall in several schools. Our goal is that our families don't have such different experiences going from elementary, middle, and high school. It may look different, but the goal is that universally, all our schools have a framework to incentivize scholars for positive behavior, Tier 1. Universally, all schools will implement restorative practices, are Tier 2. And universally, all schools will choose from the abundant menu of alternatives to suspension, which is our Tier 3.
So if you take a look at the middle, in progress, and in progress is our climate and culture teams that we talked about. We're going to continue working with those schools and their climate and culture teams. And we also have to think about a budget for how we will continue to partner with the 4 mental health agencies that are pushing clinical services into our schools.
This is a potential policy timeline. There are a few listed here. One that we'll be taking a look at tonight, which is the revised wellness policy, which, upon thoughtful consideration may not be a policy. What I've learned recently, that it used to be called a wellness statement of assurance, and I think it sort of evolved into a policy, but doesn't really look like a policy. And so we may have to relook on how that's written, ensuring that we're following the Massachusetts Association School Committee guidelines when it comes to policies. That is all we have for you tonight. Tom and I are really excited to continue to roll up our sleeves on behalf of our scholars, dedicated staff, and our caregivers. I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Monades.
Member McCullough, followed by
I'm just going to close it up.
Okay.
Thank you through the
Madam
chair.
Superintendent.
So you heard a lot of information tonight, and you can see that there's so much to be done in this area. Again, I want to thank the school committee for your support in recognizing the need to really create a division that can focus on this work. What you will hear during budget development are some recommendations on how to further resource to support this implementation of the theory of action. We do not expect our schools just to make this happen magically, but our data shows us clearly that our youth are asking for additional tools and strategies. And I would argue that our adults need those tools and strategies as well. The pandemic has been difficult on all of us. So more to come on this, and welcome your feedback and your questions. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, team.
Member McCullough, followed by Member Kamara.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I have a few comments and questions. First of all, I'm really happy to hear about the wraparound coordinator for the Parent Information Center. I actually think that was something I even mentioned to Dr. Monarez when she was first transitioning in here, when she came to visit after accepting the position. I had the opportunity to spend some time there last year and shadow a little bit, and I know they'd certainly welcome that, and we're really excited to do something like that. So I'm happy to hear that that's happening. I have Bright. I'm really happy that Bright is expanding, or that we're looking at that, because I know that was a concern last year, that there were some schools that wanted that program and it wasn't allowed at that time. And I know that was rather frustrating, the feedback that we got from our schools of how beneficial that can be. Now, I had a question. I know you talked a little bit about the change in structure with the school psychs, the SACs, and then you're referencing clinicians. Now, when you're referencing clinicians, are you through the chair, are you referencing clinicians that are employees of the Worcester Public Schools or clinicians that are contracted employees?
That's a great question, and thank you. We're talking about the mental health agencies we contracted with, and the clinicians are pushing it.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about the structure change overall? So currently SACs, school adjustment counselors, and school psychologists are under who currently?
They're under the supervisor, under the Office of Social Emotional Learning, Jean Conway.
Okay, and now the SACs will now move under the principals in the building, and the school psychologists will stay under Jean, or they're moving to special ed?
Thank you. They're actually moving under special education.
Okay, and so I just want to get into this a little bit. I know we're trying to move forward, right? We don't want to keep looking back at the past, but a big concern previously was that we weren't hearing the voices of the SACs and the psychs. And is this type of transition through the chair something that we did rely on their feedback as well for?
Yeah, what I heard during my listening sessions was that they were being plucked, and moved to different schools. And so it's important for us, for the continuity of our students and building those relationships, that they remain in one building. They're going to continue to receive support from Jean Conway as far as professional learning, consult time, However, I want them to have more of a sense of community in their school and also build those relationships with caregivers, scholars, and staff.
Okay. And then can you tell me a little bit about now with utilizing the clinicians from the outside agencies? You know, definitely something we had been asking for, right? We wanted to contract with some of these outside agencies to provide additional supports and services for our students. What is the role of the school psychologist now moving forward versus the utilization of these clinicians that we are contracting with?
Are we talking, just for clarity purposes, are we talking about Catapult, which is the services that for our students that are being referred to special education testing? Or
I think either. All of the information, please.
That's actually a fantastic question. So we did identify a great need. Psychologists, as we know, have been testing and not really doing the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports. And so what we did was we contracted with an outside agency to have that testing done, to get caught up and really alleviate and take the weight off of psychologists so they can do the other work that they love to do.
Absolutely. No, thank you for answering those questions. I think that I brought up everything. I guess the only thing that I would ask is just moving forward, you know, we continue to get updates around this project. I know that we had the meeting at TLSS the other night where we spoke about some needs and wants and just continuing to get updates around this, and especially with the action step of refining the Parent Information Center, just that we're kept in the loop on that as school members too, because that's a big thing that we're asked about a lot, is trying to help families with those resources and making sure we're understanding those changes as well. So as of right now, those are my questions and comments, and thank you both.
Thank you.
Member Kamara?
Thank you to the chair. I want to first of all thank the both of you for executing this presentation. I am going to be the bearer of bad news. So I understand that the data that we have here as far as in-school suspensions going down. I have had several families reach out to me where their kids were pulled out of our schools for reasons that are, I have talked to even the superintendent about, brought to your attention, and to the respective EDs. And I see that these numbers here, while we do see and we're happy that they are going down, my question is, I want to understand what does this mean, these numbers here for the fiscal year 22-23. I would like to see a breakdown of the schools because it's a compiled full number of all of our schools. And I personally want to know the policies that we have in terms of resulting to other alternatives rather than suspending. I want to understand how are we infusing this language within our schools so that we can get less emails from families and families can feel like their kids have are being heard, are given the chances that they deserve, and rather than being pulled out. Because I've had some really angry parents.
Thank you for the question. So we've developed a menu of alternatives to suspensions with principal input, and so we've just we've developed it, and we're still kind of tweaking it. It's a living document, right, with various tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. So in order to keep the student in school learning, and so it's a little bit of a learning curve, right? It's a bit of a mind shift. So it's going to take some time for them to get used to it, but we're committed to this. We're committed to really keeping our scholars in school and learning. And learning from their behaviors in order to reteach those behaviors, right? But I'm happy to get you that breakdown by school.
I will appreciate that. And I think for me, I understand like the words that we say, I get it, right? And then like the practicality of it, it's a little bit, it's what lingers. But I will appreciate that, and I think I appreciate the work that we've done here as a district with a new administration coming on and infusing these languages and actually finding that we have a state law that actually is telling us to do something else than what we've been doing in the past. So I'm happy for these things, but I would just continue to advocate that we continue to support all our families in our district, all our kids in our district, which is paramount. I do have other questions. My other questions. So like to what my colleague McCullough also mentioned, the explanation when you had mentioned about the changes, I really got lost in that. I did, and so for me, I'm a visual learner and also auditorial. So I would appreciate if we can get like everything that you said, it was brilliant, but I wanted to follow along too, so I couldn't. So I would love if you can also make a motion to see if you can provide that for us, that, little framework of what everything is, because I can't even decide, or I feel uncomfortable to decide like who's moving where, without kind of seeing that.
I'm happy to provide that.
Thank you so much.
Madam Superintendent?
Member Camara, what we're going to do is, in preparation for the budget season that's upcoming, we're going to make sure that that work is couched into a bigger picture of what's happening throughout the district. And so we'll provide that in some briefings that we'll have for the committee. So it'll be that restructuring along with some other things going on. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I think maybe the Clay, some center that I mentioned, I didn't even.
Clay Center.
What is it?
Oh, the Clay Center, that's the audit.
Clay or
Clay
Center,
Clay.
okay. Thank you, yes. And and then the other part too, you said some phenomenal things about the different things that we're doing for students, teachers, and parents. And the action steps are really great, but like, it's just for me, it's like I want to understand like what we're doing for this population. And then within the student population, you mentioned alternative school students, and I love the fact that we're thinking about them. But I would just appreciate for us to kind of categorize and what we're doing for the teachers and all the fantastic things we're doing for the parents, right? And then as we talk about parents, I was happy, and then I'm asking myself, how are we doing that? But I think that's also can be a backup, like how are we doing this? And then when is another word. There's something that I wrote down. When. And I'll have two more things, and I'll sit down for this item. So in the policy timeline, it says emotional support dog policy and service dog policy. I'm thinking about this with regards to the students that we have in our district being, diverse students, right? And I'm thinking about how the programs that we are engaged with also really merit with what wellness means for that population. Not to say that service dog and the policy is not what matters, but I think in this case, this is a particular niche with these two things here that I see here. So I want to understand what wellness means if we're saying we're developing a wellness plan and all that. How does that merit with what wellness means for a cultural person? At the university level, I do service dogs, but I know the population that's kind of like narrow to our white students. So I kind of want to understand that more. And lastly, I want to understand how are we using services at the state level. We talked about services, and I know that at the state of Massachusetts, there's a Massachusetts Behavioral Health Helpline, which is a new system. It's a 24-hour system. I think 200 plus languages spoken, and it's a free service, no insurance needed, that students can use. And I'm thinking of how are we using these like services to kind of like boost what we're doing in our district. And yes, and family health centers. We talked about it in terms of using that, and I think that's wonderful, expanding the health centers, and I think that's in the schools, which we do need to do. And I think in the plan that you mentioned was it Tuesday we had a meeting? TLSS, I think you mentioned that Monday. Yeah, Monday we had a meeting. I love this model, but I'd like to understand how are we doing that in our strategic plan for our wellness strategic plan, to really look at and expand it more, because I think that's a niche in terms of the kind of wellness plans that we do provide in our district, and that is it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kumar.
Okay. Member Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So given the amount of sort of time and energy and attention that this committee spent on mental health and social emotional concerns, really just during this term, I think I was approaching this report this evening with, it's mid-April, and what has changed over the course of this school year. And I think I'm still struggling to see what has changed, particularly from the perspective of an average student in one of our buildings. And I know that change takes time, and I understand that. But part of the reason that we kept talking about it, even when it was extraordinarily unpopular during the previous administration, is because it was really that urgent. Which we see, of course, in terms of the statistics. And I do want to note, by the way, that the CDC, you noted that the report that the next time that they take that survey is going to be in the fall of 2023. So we should realize that it's the fall of 2021 that's actually the last data that we have, which of course was, in Worcester, we, among other things, were not actually back in school buildings. So sort of my questions at this point, I want to absolutely echo what my colleague just said in terms of I need a diagram. I need narrative. It is not under our purview to determine how departments are organized. Completely agree, understand. But I need to know what the change is, because this is a section of this administration that is a very, very grave concern to this committee. And if we are going to be taking our limited staffing, which we've heard again and again, and I agree with, is far too limited, and change what they're doing, who they answer to, and so forth. I want to know all of it, both in terms of how it looks and why, and all of that, please. I also really would appreciate, so what I managed to pull out of the report is that in terms of the 4 mental health agencies, at this point, what we have them treating is somewhere around 17 students, with that going up to something like 37 after April vacation. I understand there's a shortage of clinicians. I get it. We know that well. That's why we had as many openings for psychologists as we did. But I will say that troubles me, because that was supposed to be part of the answer, and maybe it isn't the answer. Maybe that wasn't what we needed. We were trying it. I don't know, but that is concerning. I also am curious. We're getting data here from the students, and I appreciate the notion that it's self-reported, which is always important. But then I would really be interested in that data then going back to our students and saying, what would you have us do with this? Because I will say that, and this may just be the teacher in me, I'm a little bit allergic to theories of action. I understand the notion is supposed to be that we're trying to make sure that the adults don't blame the kids for whatever it is that's supposed to be happening. I get it. But I think that, this theory of action, particularly coming after, this is the elevated rates of attempts of suicide, and we're going to do things like bring a sense of belonging and self-efficacy. Not saying those are bad, just saying that might not be exactly what we need. I would really be interested in hearing from students in terms of, do they need, is it about access to student adjustment counselors? We heard over and over again, and this administration has been very responsive to that the notion of some sort of a space where they could go, chill, for lack of a better word. A lot of our schools have embraced that. It's being very enthusiastically received, is my understanding. That's great. That came from the students. We embraced it. We did it. The adults said, yes, let's do this. I'd like to see more of that. I know when, some of the things that I've heard, again, in my own household, so this is anecdotal, is things like, well, I can't bring my problem to the guidance counselor because the guidance counselor is busy dealing with the kid who got thrown out of their house this morning and has no place to sleep. The kid whose parents just got arrested and has no place to go. Like, there are kids who are ongoingly in crisis in our school, and sometimes that means that kids who are saying things like, how do I apply to college? Or how do I figure out what I want to do for a job? Don't actually get that space. So I want to make sure that we're giving all of those. I'm concerned to hear that we have 10 subcommittees working on a 3-year plan at the same time that we seem to be doing an assessment, because we are then auditing and changing at the same time, and that doesn't seem to me to necessarily make a lot of sense. I might be misunderstanding. I also will say that I think I'm reaching a point at which the only place that I want to hear the word audit again is in finance and operations. I think I'm kind of reaching the end of my tolerance for additional audits. I assume that we'll be seeing something about additional staff, I hope, because to me, I think that that's actually part of what's going on here. That to me is probably the main fiscal implication, I hope. I will say, I was going to mention this later, wellness is actually a policy, it's ADF. So yes, we should do that. The one thing that I do want to strongly represent to my colleagues is that in terms of coming policies, the Mass Association of School Committees has quite deliberately not put out a model gender identity policy for the straightforward reason that in Massachusetts, gender identity is a protected class under Massachusetts civil rights laws and has been since 2011. We think it's actually really important not to single out gender identity as needing some sort of separate clause or class and make them something that gets battled over in terms of policy. I agree that it is important for administration to have strong internal protocols around that, both for student protection and for a feeling of student safety. I would suggest to administration that the right place to go to that is actually with our high school GSAs, because I know that they actually have model forums, are tied into statewide networks, and actually have some things for that. So thank you for the report. Look forward to some of what Member Kamar has asked for, and also, as you've noted, some of the additional information that will be coming forward as part of the budget process.
Thank you. Member Johnson?
Yes. Thank you to the chair, to the administration. Thanks for this report. Some questions some of my colleagues have already asked and kind of talked about. You know, as I've been going around and kind of visiting schools, I was just at Forest Grove last week, and I went through their civics thing, and they did some things on bullying and other things like that. And a student said to me, you know, I just met my guidance counselor for the first time when I had just scheduled my classes for high school next year. And when she said, I didn't even know we had a counselor in school that could help with whatever's going on. And when you have a big bulletin up and it says bullying and whatever, like, she's not gonna go and just read that and look for information and pull it off the thing. How do students who are maybe not outwardly showing certain things or whatever, but maybe struggling in school with certain things, how do we reach them? What's the outreach to them, and how can we include them in whatever? Because every kid looks different, right? So that's just a question I have that I'm just throwing out there to kind of think about in the future. You know, when I look at the suspension rates, and when you look at middle school, and I was going back in my head kind of looking at, you know, when COVID started and what grade those kids were in or whatever, I think we're really seeing where it's kind of manifested itself, right? Because you see in the high schools where the numbers have started to go down, which is great. So how do we really target that group of kids that are there? So again, that's just another piece to kind of throw out and think about. And you had, Mr. Jones, you had mentioned about mediation and conflict resolution or whatever. And I know you just started, but I'm just wondering, like, what else out there? Like, is that the end all be all? And how do we determine whether or not that's effective? And there's other things that we should look at, or other means or whatever. And I'm not sure if you guys already have in mind on what you're looking at in regards to working with our students around this stuff, and if anyone has the answer to that.
Mr. Tony?
Yeah, so those are obviously where I'm in the learning mode too, but those are just some of the things that we've been looking at, and I've been trying to work closely with principals on other alternatives that they see fit for certain schools, because we all know that there's not one shoe that fits all. So we're going to work with principals and schools to develop, like we talked about before, a menu of alternatives that were just some of the few ones that we talked about: conflict, mediation, restorative practices. thing called structured days and stuff like that. But that is something very new, and we're planning to see what works best for the schools and monitor it and get the best practices out to everybody.
Thank you for that. Another question. It's just, this is a weird question, random. What does an in-school suspension day look like for an elementary student? How does that look?
Mr. Tony?
So it can vary from school to school. If I was the principal, because everybody knows I was the principal at Grafton Street School before this, so my in-house would be removing the kid from his classroom and putting them into another classroom. Sometimes grade levels, sometimes a lower grade, but then they are completing their work during the day.
In another classroom?
In another classroom. Depending on the school and the space and everything like that.
So that's considered an in-school suspension for, at your school it is, but throughout the district, what is considered an in-school suspension for? Because I'm just wondering, when I think of in-school suspension for a middle school or high school, I'm thinking coping room, whatever, you're there for 3 days, you're excluded, you're doing your work in there, it's a dock room. I've been there before, believe me. It's a dock room, and that's where you are for 3 to 5 days, and then you come out and, how does that look for elementary schools?
Madam Superintendent?
I'll pass it on to Sue.
Yeah, so it's exactly, for an elementary school student, think about it in terms of separation from their peers for that time period. So it's not days on end. It would be, when I was a principal, it would be the day, typically wasn't more than a day that you would have an in-school suspension because you are impacting another classroom. But it is time away from their peers, which, and then they're working on their grade level work. So each school might have some nuances. Like when I was a principal, that meant at lunchtime they're having lunch with me, that they weren't having lunch with their peers. I see Mr. Tony shaking his head. So think about in-school suspension is time away from their peers in their classroom setting.
Okay. And that could vary school to school? Right.
The details of it would vary school to school, yes.
Okay. I think my peers, colleagues actually answered a lot of the questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many times were you in the dock room? No. Okay. They get, what's that? Member Kamara?
Thank you. To the chair, thank you. I want to say that we love Mr. Tony, and I want to say that the first time actually when I went to, not the first time, but when I visited his school, when he was a principal at Grafton Street School, I actually saw, a display of some of the things that he just mentioned with regards to a young student, that was a little bit upset. And there's a room at the school where they've designed, at the time when I was there, it was a space and they're thinking about painting it and everything, but they put the young girl there in the nice beanbag, and she was catered to, and and she had I think it was a wraparound coordinator that was kind of supporting her until she kind of calmed down a little bit, and then they walked her to that was like a baby. I think it was just like a baby or something. Mm-hmm. And I was really amazed. I said to myself, oh my goodness. Like, I understand that the school is a small school and they're struggling for space, but they were able to have this wellness space, and that blew my mind. And I was like, okay, so what are we doing in the district, right? What other elementary schools have these wellness spaces? But what I want to also say to that is that I missed one of my points here. Incentivize students, and my point here was to kind of again, what and how, and then I think one of the job descriptions in here, which I will get up again and speak, and then try to talk on this thing too, is that I have student health club. I mentioned that on Monday. Like, what are we doing to? And I agree with what what my colleague mentioned, is to bring this data back to the student, to kind of figure out what they want. But from some of my perspective, from some of the things that I've seen, I don't think we have enough school health clubs in our schools, which would be students volunteering their time to take on health initiatives within their schools. They could be trained as peer leaders. This is a model that is, nationally, even internationally recognized. There are curriculum to do that. And then can we incentivize students to do stuff like that? I know at the university level, it looks different from how you do at the elementary level or secondary education level. That's fine. But That was the point that I made. And I am so excited of this entire thing that we have going on. I'm excited to see more of our schools have these physical space and what that looked like per school, and how we're able to really shape the overall experiences for our kids in our public schools. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for the report. And mental health and social emotional learning has been a big part of my, as mayor of the city side too, in the public health department. And it's good to see a report. I just have one quick question. The middle school just stands like a sore thumb here. I know there's a transitioning period, which probably causes a lot of issues. What are those numbers coming down in the middle school? It's not broken down by month, so I can't tell if is it on the rise in the middle schools, or is it steady? Or
Oh, I think it's on the decline.
it's on the decline? Okay.
Yeah. With the amount of support that we're putting out to those middle schools.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the report. Well done. Okay. It's just good to see someone provide a nice report on this. So we can file that. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. We're on the approval of grants and other finance items. Consider approval of the prior year payment and adjustment for the Worcester Public School custodian in the amount of $414.67. Roll call. Oh, hang on, we'll do them all together unless anybody has an objection to any of these or questions.
I
Ms.
have
Novick?
questions on 2 of the grants.
Two of these?
2 of the grants, yes.
Okay. So we can take them collectively, and if you want, I'll just read them, then you can consider the approval of the Title III, Part A, Immigrant Children and Youth Grant that provides supplemental resources to school districts to provide enhanced instructional opportunities for immigrant children and youth in the amount of $70,475. And consider the approval of the Afghan Refugee Support for Schools Grant to enhance LEA capacity to promote the academic performance and successful integration of Afghan newcomer students in the amount of $455,139. And consider approve of the school nutrition equipment assistance grant to purchase a new meat slicer and refrigerated serving line for the Claremont Academy in the amount of $19,825. Ms. Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, on the Afghan Refugee Support grant, it says under, and first of all, thank you for the breakdown in terms of this, and I appreciate the way that the grants office is presenting this. Number 6, in terms of the budget, it says contractual services. Community organizations will provide support to the WPS core team in understanding the unique needs of this population and how to plan and execute activities. I'm just wondering if we already have identified those organizations. That's on page 87, if that matters. And maybe nobody knows offhand. Sorry, I didn't give any warning on this one.
Through the chair, Member Novak, I believe, but I'm making an educated guess here, that this is the work that took place last summer that we're going to be repeating in collaboration with Quinn-Sigeman Community College.
Mm-hmm.
I can confirm that, but I do believe that that's what this is about, because I saw it last year in practice, and everything else leads to that as well.
Okay. And then the other question I had, Mr. Chair, is in the Title III Immigrant Grant on page 95 of the agenda. Again, the budget, number 6, contractual services, it says family resource navigators, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about what that was, particularly since it's coming through as a contractual service rather than that we're necessarily employing someone. Is that something that somebody can talk a little bit about offhand?
I believe Dr. Morris can come up and...
And again, I apologize for not sort of giving you a heads up ahead of time.
Dr. Morse?
Through the chair, I believe that the grant will be through PIC, and the contracted services are for community-based people to work within the PIC and with the FACE, which is our Family and Community Agency Directors, to create a better opportunity for our immigrant families as they register for school and enroll, and to learn about what the community can provide.
Excellent. Yeah. So I did want to say, by the way, I really applaud the description here is that that the family and community engagement is focusing efforts on the 3 groups with the highest number of those who have most recently immigrated, which is Brazil, Central America, and Haiti, to try to actually get those families much sort of more closely integrated into the Worcester Public Schools, and I thought that was fantastic. So I just wanted to have a better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take those 4 items under N, approve of the grants and other finance items. Those 4 items under N, we'll take collectively on a roll call.
Member Clancy? Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Melham?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick?
Yes.
Member Pitt?
Yes. We're on general business. We have the request that the administration arrange an alternative WEA trip in lieu of the current trip to Old Sturbridge Village. For request that the administration ensures that the Worcester Public Schools funds voluntarily are allocated to Old Sturbridge Village or its affiliates. Ms. Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our EAW president for speaking on this already this evening. Note, of course, that the call actually initially came from the MTA and the EAW in terms of proposing a boycott of OSV. And I do want to be clear, there I think is this notion that somehow this is considered to be punitive or retribution or something of the kind. And really what this is about is that we as an organization with a substantial budget, which also, among other things, kind of directs other resources that aren't even necessarily our own, do have a responsibility to ensure that those resources are being used in means that are ethical and to support activities and organizations that are ethical. And this body just asked that that organization be investigated by the Attorney General, the State Auditor, the Office of the Inspector General, and the Ethics Commission. And I think that it actually just frankly doesn't make sense if that is our position, which it is, because we've been very public about that, to then say, oh yes, but by the way, we're going to actually continue to direct all of our 3rd graders there every year and continue to actually enable thousands of dollars to be flowing into their coffers. So this is not in any way intended as retribution. This is intended for the Worcester School Committee as a good steward of resources that we either direct directly or send in a particular direction, to do so in a way that is ethical. I do also want to address the concern that I've heard that somehow this is going to be depriving our children of some sort of particular activity that they otherwise would have taken away from them. The 3rd grade learning standard that we're supporting with the Old Sturbridge Village field trip is Massachusetts state history. I'm going to ask my colleagues, do we have any lack of opportunities for Massachusetts state history field trips, right? I happen to work, I came from work today. I work on State Street, right down the street from the State House. Every time it's warm outside, I practically trip over a whole bunch of 3rd graders because we're on the Freedom Trail. We could send kids in almost any direction and have no lack of a wealth of opportunities for Massachusetts history. So I want to reassure teachers and students and families that there's no lack of options in terms of field trips, but I do think that it is important for us to be consistent in our position in terms of the direction of our resources. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we'll send that to the Member Mailman.
I just quickly want to rise and thank Member Novick for putting this item on. I completely, and at the top of my pile today, I found the letter that we sent to those 4. And if we are serious about the charges that are in this letter, and I know I was when I signed it, then this is just an extension of that policy in our deliberation. So thank you for the item.
Thank you. So I know the administration already made a comment on this. Do we want to file this or send it right to the administration? We'll send it to the administration. Those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Okay. Ms. McCullough, consider adding AirPod usage to the policy handbook and utilization administrator, educator, and student feedback during the development of the policy. Ms.
As it
McCullough.
reads.
Those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Okay, Mr. Johnson, to consider the request of the administration look into the options available regarding vaping detector purchasing and the placement in secondary schools. Member Johnson?
Yes. I might want to just amend it a bit, because I just want to make sure that we really take a look at this due to the health and safety of our kids and the well-being. I think it's important, and I'm not sure if I need to amend it in a way that it reads that we look at different options, so we pick the right, make sure that I'm following procedure here on that we look at other options, come up with the best one through finance and operations, because that's where we're asking it to go, and hopefully make a decision to do that to ensure the health and safety of our kids. Thanks.
Okay, as amended, I know we had 2 students from Forest Grove come into the city council meeting on Tuesday night to talk about vaping in their study, and it's in the Public Health Committee, for Sarah Rivera's committee, to discuss. So we'll send that to administration. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. To consider approval of coordination with the city council to display signs when the Worcester State acknowledges the North High boys basketball team as the MIAA Division I state title winner, in order to showcase the hard work of the coach and the team. Member Kamara?
Thank you for that item as it reads.
Okay, this is a nice item, and
So I think
go ahead.
we spoke about this, and I think we're going to send it to a school committee with city council.
we can send it to city council. It's already been discussed, just to let you know, so it's on track. The issue we have, so people will know, is that a lot of these signs go on state property, and there's an issue with that, so we can find city property to put these signs on, so.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Yep.
and so we'll send that to city manager. How's that? And those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Okay. To consider suspending the voluntary school uniform policy until language is added, providing an exit. Ms. Kolanovic,
As it reads.
what does that mean exactly? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the administration is recommending that it go to governance, and I'm actually deferring to them on that because the dress code is going back to governance, and this is actually
Okay.
part of the dress code. The proposal is this: if you are a parent right now who sends your child to a school with a voluntary uniform policy, you did not vote that uniform policy. It long precedes you. And we have no exit for schools that may wish to no longer have one, and we do not re-up them on a regular basis. So simply, it's one of those where the parents who happen to be in the building at that time vote something, and then everybody is stuck forever. And that seems to me an inappropriate way of creating that kind of policy. So I'd welcome governance taking that on.
We'll send that to governance for discussion and recommendation. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. To consider moving dance teams under athletics. That is, Ms. Noah.
Shocking, I know, it wasn't over here.
I'm sorry, Member McCullough, right? Imagine that. No, so this is really just a question, right? Again, as we said earlier, how the administration is administered is entirely up to the administration. However, many long years ago now, I did make a motion to move cheerleading under athletics because, of course, it is an athletic endeavor. Dance obviously is an athletic endeavor. There is more to the question than simply that, though. This is about everything from finance to who people answer to and those sorts of things, and those get into administrative questions. So I'm actually just simply posing the question. I do not have an opinion. I would be interested in what administration has to say about it. Thank you.
Okay. Send out the administration. Those in favor, opposed, so ordered. From the administration, the request that the school committee consider formal recommendation of an elementary EAL core curriculum program for implementation for the 23-24 school year.
Can
Ms. McCullough?
I would just like to make a motion on this. I know that this is a rather time-sensitive issue, and I'm wondering if I could make a motion that administration provide an opportunity for some optional time for each school committee member to have some. We used to do this with a virtual session where you'd have people that weren't on the same subcommittee so that you didn't have a quorum issue that could hear the presentation and ask questions, and make a motion that we, if my TLSS colleagues are available virtually on the 24th, to set a time to do a special meeting to approve the curriculum once you've had your questions answered. I think, no, sorry, not the 24th. Is it Monday the 24th? No. Yeah, Monday the 24th, virtually. It would just be a virtual meeting. We can one off that after, but I want to set up a special meeting to approve the curriculum and have the No, it will be for us to approve it so that it comes back to the full school committee at the next meeting, and administration is prepared to set up times that are optional for school committee members to hear about the curriculum next week.
Okay. Ms. Novick?
With all respect to that, and certainly being the very last person in the world to skip procedure, given the backup that we had, which was actually substantive and frankly answered all of my questions, and that all we are approving is a pilot, I'm actually comfortable simply approving the notion of a pilot this evening. Would that be in order?
Can we have an answer on someone on that? No.
It looks.
Let's get the short straw. Dr. Morse? No, whoever.
Can we repeat the question?
They want to, go ahead.
So we're just confirming right now, this is not a pilot. This is us to institute a new policy, a new curriculum for next school year based on pilot work that we've already done. And the motion I'm putting forward is administration will set up some optional times next week for committee members to virtually ask questions and hear about curriculum if they have them. So then TLSS can hold a special meeting on Monday virtually to approve the curriculum. So then it can come back to the at some point at the beginning of the week after vacation to approve it so that it can come back to full committee for full approval so you can move forward.
Correct.
And the reason why we're doing these optional sessions is so if people have any questions about the curriculum that they can ask them in the 2-pair groupings that we've utilized in the past virtually.
What are we asking that to? We ask it to, what's the question?
I believe I clarified that it's not a pilot. It's a full curriculum.
Okay.
It's not. We've already piloted.
Okay.
Administration is looking for full approval. They want to make sure that people have if they have questions, they can adequately answer them in those sessions that we used to utilize. Remember in the past, we've utilized the 2 off slots, and administration would present to it. But I mean, certainly I'm open to other suggestions.
So you want to send this to the committee for the 27th? Which is fine.
Maybe I'll let Dr. Morse, if you want to speak.
Do you have a recommendation?
Yes, we'd like to send the final recommendation to the full committee on the 27th. What we're hoping to do is have an opportunity for any school committee member to meet in small groups to learn more about the final selection, and we would be able to provide you with some of the information and feedback that we received from educators, from principals, from teachers, and everybody that viewed and reviewed all of the materials and also piloted the different materials in the schools. We looked at 7. We started at 7. We were able to work with this team over the course of the year to finalize it down to 2 top contenders. And at this moment, we still do not know which is the final contender yet. We still are compiling all of the information that we have received from surveys and information from educators.
Okay, so you want to bring us in for the next meeting and for a vote. So it's here now, so the issue is just hold this until the next meeting and people can discuss it, or?
We have a timeline for, we'd like to be able to approve this in time to be able to get the initial PD sessions and materials ordered in June. And so with the sequence of meetings.
So you want us to vote this on the 27th, correct? Have I missed that, or?
Ideally.
Ideally, we would like to be able to get the committee's consent and approval as soon as possible.
Right.
So you're giving the committee some time to review it. If they have questions, they can call the superintendent or yourselves. Is that what the recommendation is? Okay. Ms. Mailman?
So what are you recommending? Is that in here? No.
No.
Okay.
No,
So we're not going to, I think I'm following Molly. We're not going to have a recommendation till after school vacation.
The TLSS.
And then you're going to,
Through the chair to administration. Administration would like to set up these sessions, optional sessions that people can have next week where they'll go over the curriculum to ask the questions so that when they come to full TLSS on whatever time and day we set up at the beginning of the week after vacation, we can vote on it in TLSS and either vote yay or nay, so then it comes back to the full committee on the 27th.
Oh, so you're going to set up a TLSS meeting before the 27th?
Procedurally, it should go to TLSS
Yeah.
first, because
Okay.
it's approval for a
So
full
send this
curriculum
to-
that's been piloted. Though I feel
I
like
get it now.
Member Novick may have some questions.
Clarification.
Yeah.
So next week, there's going to be meetings. Is that right?
Next week's
Through
going
the
to be
chair,
what?
that is correct.
Next week, okay.
The week after.
No, it sounds like,
Oh, during vacation week, okay. Okay,
not
if people want interest. Okay, so basically, you're going to have, when's the TLS committee meeting?
We don't know.
I can't believe this is so confusing.
I will work with the administration and Member Mailman and Member Kamara to make sure
Set
that's
a
set up
date
for the
before the
beginning of the
27th.
week. Before the 27th, so that it can be,
Okay, that sounds right. So you're going to present everything before the 27th to the subcommittee. Subcommittee is going to recommend yea and nay to back to the full school committee for the 27th. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
okay, so last clarifying question through the chair to the chair. So one meeting. We're going to have one TLSS meeting sometime before the 27th.
with just this item, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Member Novick, followed by Member Johnson.
Okay. And you're requesting that teams of 2 from the school committee participate in a meeting with administration if they choose next week in order to go over the curriculum if we have any questions. Right. Thank you.
Ms. Novick?
Okay. So the reason I was confused is because there isn't actually a recommendation. And I understand that we're still compiling data, but that, as my colleague was catching, makes me extraordinarily uncomfortable. Partly because, less from my own concern, because I feel like I probably have ample opportunity to ask whatever questions I want to, more for the putting myself right back in an English teacher's shoes. We got this tonight. There is no recommendation. The school committee is actually reviewing this over a school vacation week. Subcommittee presumably publicly getting the recommendation on the Monday coming back from vacation week, and then the school committee meets on Thursday. I do not intend to call anyone out. I understand the urgency. I want you to have the curriculum that you want. I want you to, but I'm thinking of some second grade teacher who's wondering what the heck she's going to be teaching next year, and that doesn't feel fair. And the reason we even have any say in curriculum at all in Massachusetts is for the public process piece, and it feels like we're skimping on that. So, like, I trust your judgment. I actually am probably fine with whatever you're doing. You clearly have totally done your homework. You clearly have piloted things, and you're getting teacher feedback, and I think that's fantastic. I just am worried about, like, us as a body not sort of doing the part of the job that really is ours, which is actually less about our judgment and more about the fact that we do it publicly.
My suggestion would be, maybe the answer, let's see how it plays out. Then we can have a special meeting after the 27th if need be, just to have the public have more input.
Well, and maybe
So we
this
can
means
answer those
that, like,
questions.
when we post TLSS or when the decision is made, we blast it out everywhere and say, hey, here's what the thing is, here's where you can look at the curriculum, teachers, please. Like, that's, again, that is my only hesitation. I would be fine with having you do whatever you think is a good idea, but that's my only hesitation here.
I'm amenable to
Thank
that
So we're gonna
amendment.
send that to committee.
I think that makes sense. Based on the conversation that we had setting up to this, just at where we're at with this, I think that makes sense. I think having the opportunity to have the information presented next week in the optional sessions, setting up a meeting with my colleagues for TLSS for the beginning of the week after, but ensuring that people have the knowledge and access to that meeting to have the curriculum.
Okay, so I'm going to send this to the committee, and hopefully we have it on that Monday. And if need be, we're always going to have special meetings if it plays out that way. Okay?
Thank you.
So all those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Okay. We are on 3-103, to consider revision to the job description for the physical security systems technician. Any questions on that? Ms. Member Novick?
No, I'm confused. Again, sorry. It says to consider a revision. Is it a revision through the chair to administration?
Through the chair, no. This
Okay.
one is not a revision. This is a new job description. The position itself was previously approved in this school year's budget.
Yep.
We've just waited to bring the description forward. So my error on that, I did ask the team to put it as a revision. I thought it was. It is not a revision. It is a new position previously budgeted that we're finally
Thank you.
giving to you.
No further questions, Mr.
Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed, so ordered. Okay. Ms. Novick, to ensure that the Worcester Public Schools policies align with the federal and state non-discrimination laws in regard to protected classes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned to my colleagues at our, and to the administration at our, the time that we had spent together earlier this year, something that I had stumbled across a couple of places where it looked like our policies had sort of gone astray. And so I took it upon myself over February vacation to sit down with all of our policies and actually compare them to the state standards. And so I'll be working through the process as we go here to try to, bring forward what I know of things. And what I did was I brought forward the ones tonight that I thought were, frankly, kind of emergencies. And so this one is just the non-discrimination policies. Under federal and state law, we're required to spell out the protected classes. This is obviously pretty core to who we are as a public institution. And so what I have done is I have pulled out all of the policies that have non-discrimination language in them, and I have ensured that each one actually has the appropriate protected classes. Now, generally we send policies to subcommittee and to governance, and they are considered there and they are sent back. I am proposing to my colleagues this evening, really only because of the import of this, which is that, frankly, we're in violation of federal and state civil rights laws right now, that we actually approve them from the floor. I tried to be as clear as humanly possible in terms of making sure that the proposed revisions were in here. There is a standard list of protected classes. These have been updated to reflect those protected classes. The ways in which they were wrong were different, which is why the editing is different. If my colleagues have any questions about any part of this, as you're aware, this is actually part of what I do for work, so I'm happy to take questions on it. The most recent revisions, I should note, by the way, you may have noticed that a number of them have a footnote in them now around race, including traits historically associated with race. That's actually the Crown Act, which was passed last year in Massachusetts, that actually added to the protected classes in Massachusetts. The other revision that I wanted to particularly note was in ACA, non-discrimination on the basis of sex, which is the Title IX policy. Under the Biden administration, they were very, very clear, and that's why there's a reference update for US DOE that was to include sexual orientation and gender identity, which of course aligns with Massachusetts general law and CMR 26. So I'm happy to take questions, again, because this is my work and I'm presenting it as nothing other than that. But I would, Mr. Chair, propose adoption from the floor this evening, simply to ensure that we're not violating federal and state law anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll send that to the, I'll make a vote.
Please.
Okay. Member Kamara?
So I do have a question, and my question is in regards to, because I see the timeline from the last time that this was updated, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 2002. That was the last, was it 2002? 2002.
So for which policy? I'm sorry.
Member Novick?
So can you just tell me which policy? Because it depends on the policy.
I think the first, I thought it was all of it, but the first few pages, because I'm trying to find my pages. Right. So the file AC non-discrimination policy, because there was one in there that I saw 2002. You're correct. And I thought it was the year for all of them. So I guess they all have different years.
They do.
So I guess so that question is what difference does it make if it was to go to governance and for us to do a process in governance, than for us to vote it here? What does that entail?
Instead of going to governance and voting it tonight,
Yeah.
we just pass it tonight if everybody's happy with that. I don't know if there's a quick turnaround on this, so.
Yeah.
It's pretty
So,
straight.
Mr. Chair, again, I have enormous respect for process. We're actually in violation of federal and state law right now.
Yeah.
That's why I thought it was kind of an
If
emergency.
if we pass this tonight and send it to governance, if you can review it at that
Because
time.
there's,
Yep.
so, I feel like I said this at a previous meeting. You can certainly do that. You're not going to get any different information, because if what you do is compare this to the standard policy, what you're going to find is what you have in front of you.
Yep.
I, as a member of this committee, which this committee is legally the Worcester Public Schools, am very, very concerned that we're not adhering to federal and state civil rights laws.
For how long has that been for?
I'm not asking that question.
So we'll send that for a vote? Okay. Ms. McCullough?
Through the chair, I think this may be a clarifying question, if I'm understanding my colleague. This is different than our policy handbook where we decide policies. This is the Worcester Public Schools policy manual that we are required to follow state and federal law on. Is that correct? So maybe that's a reason why this is a little bit different. This isn't about something that we set as policy. It's policy we have to follow by law. Is that correct, through the chair?
It's my impression, but yeah.
So policies fall under a couple of different categories. There are policies where we have flexibility, and there are policies where we don't. So all of that is in the policy manual. These, you are correct, are the kinds of policies where we don't really have a say over what it says. We have to have a particular kind of list, and the state and the federal government have already decided that. So yes, to your larger question, this isn't something where we have flexibility on.
So we can vote this, I'm sorry, Member Kamara?
So I'm not going to fight this one, but I think what I do want to comment on is that as a body or as a member, of this school committee, I understand that we all have equal voice, we all have the same equal power. I think for me, and I think I've voiced this before, what I think could have been a way for all of us to kind of, be into the creation or editing of this process. Because I understand that the ramifications as a state, policy that we have to follow all of that, but I feel like as a body, that's what should have happened. And I understand that now, one of our members has done that, and we're now passing this on the floor, which again, I'm not going to fight this, but I just think that as a new person understanding these policies, that it take for one to do, and then it passes to the next subcommittee. But as I said, I'm not fighting this, but I do think that process is something that I will speak about.
Okay. So we're going to take that vote tonight as presented. All those in favor? Opposed, so ordered. Okay. We are on 3-105, to align the policy of the IC/ICA with the state regulation. 603 CMR 27. Ms. Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similarly, although I actually found this one a little bit kind of more amusing, as some of my colleagues may recall, in spring of 2020, the Commissioner of Education actually shortened the school year to 170 days and said that we had 10 days of professional development. As a result, the Worcester School Committee changed policy IC/ICA to say that we were going 170 days, and then we never changed it back. So currently our policy says that we go 170 days. We don't. State regulation actually still requires that we go 180 days. I'm sorry to the students who may be listening. So it should say 180 days. That's all that the revision does, is it brings us back into line with 603 CMR 27. Thank you.
Okay, we can make that change. I'll let the students know you put that in. And so those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Next up is consider a revision to the job description of the Director of Nursing. Are we all set with that? Ms. Novick?
Just one thing, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned to see the Director of Nursing being moved down in the tree to report to the Administrative Director of Positive Youth Development. And I partly am reflecting, as you know, with certainly the heavy involvement we had with the nursing department during the pandemic, but also all of the various ways in which nursing is so crucial to kind of so much of what we do in the Worcester Public Schools. I really would be much more comfortable seeing that actually be a direct report to sort of the head of that division, rather than the Administrative Director of Positive Youth Development. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we're all set with the review. Member Kamara?
Thank you. I also have one thing to say. So in there it says responsible for updating the wellness policy. Number one, I see that some of the qualifications or degree qualifications that were being asked didn't really mention to have public health in that. So there are people who are public health nurses. And if we're going to say that the person is going to be overseeing like wellness policy, I think sometimes you can have a medical model, or you can have a comprehensive wellness model that's actually a wellness model. And so I will want to make an amendment to add that in there, like a public health, if the person has a public health background and they went to get their nurse certification or whatever else. I also wanted to maybe get a confirmation in this, because for this one person to create a whole wellness or update a whole wellness policy, I'm thinking whether the tax would be that this director of nursing would go out and bring people on through a task force or something, create something that would help them, and hopefully that those people will have understanding of what wellness actually is for our district. But those are two things that I was a bit concerned about, and the other job description, which we'll talk about, and I was wondering whether that responsible for updating that policy, whether it matched better with the other job description that is about with the Director of Culture and Climate.
Ma'am, we're on nursing here right now, Madam Superintendent.
Yeah, through the chair. So I'm going to recommend actually that we hold this, because I want us to take a look at your first ask, which is the public health piece. I don't want that to become something that then makes this a barrier where we might not be able to fill it, because there are certain requirements that this position must have per DESI. So I'm going to put a hold on this, because again, that might be a desirable qualification, but not a must-have, and we need to dig deeper into that.
Nursing you're talking about?
Excuse me?
Which one are we talking about, nursing?
I'm talking about the nursing, the Director of Nursing.
Okay.
So I'm going to put a pause on that. I do want to respond to your second question, which was around the development of the wellness policy. It is a group of individuals that do this. It's not the director by themselves. They convene a task force and they review it annually. So that does already happen. And if I remember correctly, and Ms. Asalosa, if you know this answer, that's per DESI that we have to have this group that does this on an annual basis. Yes. So your second part is it does happen. The first question, though, I'm going to recommend that we hold then and not approve this, because I wouldn't want to put something in here that then makes it unable for us to fill it.
Sounds good.
Instead of holding, have we just send it back to the administration? Then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we'll send that back to the administration. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Next up is consider a revision to the job description of the Director of Culture and Climate. Madam Superintendent.
Yeah, I'm going to also ask that we hold this job description. It's going to come back in the bigger package as we talk about budget. This is not a rush, and so I'd rather it be in a greater context for the committee for you to make that decision. So we're going to hold on this. It'll come back after through the budget deliberation process.
Okay, so you want me to send it back to the administration?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll send that back to the administration. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Oh, Member Kamara?
Can you ask questions?
Yeah, sure. I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you. Similarly, so I would also like to ask, and after, of course, with DESI's purview for this position too, that we include public health and also CHES, so Certified Health Education Specialist, or the MCHES, as kind of like educational background for this, if that's kind of per the, per Jesse's purview. And so before, when I had mentioned about the nursing, I was thinking whether or not this position, based on all the description and the verbiage that was used in the job description and what the tasks that they do, I was wondering whether this updating wellness policy is best placed under this role versus the nursing. But again, I'm just asking a question. I'm not saying anything. And then my other thing was about, I think when I look and read about this job description, I'm asking myself, how are they going to do what they're going to do? Like, what does that look like in our district, per our schools, per elementary school, per middle school, per high schools? And supporting students. So it seems like it's more like student focused. So what does that look like? And anyways, I was just in the weeds of the day-to-day things. And that's me, but thank you.
Member Camara, if you could just state those. So I heard public health, and then you said the others very quickly. I didn't grab them.
Yeah, so CHES, so there's a certification for health education specialist, and then the MCHES, MCHES.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll send it back to we already voted to send it back to administration with the suggested changes from Member Kamara. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Let's see, to consider approval of the revised wellness policy. Member Novick?
Two things, just would add that this is policy ADF, so we should call it that. And the answer to Member Kamara's question is actually in the legal references at the bottom of this. So the Wellness Committee is actually spelled out in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 111, Section 223, which is actually what also requires an annual revision and so forth. We sort of got full circle here. I know it's going to governance. That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll send that to governance. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. To consider the approval of the new course, Unified Physical Education, to be piloted at Burncoat High School for the 23-24 school year. Okay. Go ahead. Member Kamara?
Thank you. To the chair. I just want to understand, how did this course come into play? Like, what was the thought process about it, that we needed it? Just a general question.
Madam Superintendent?
We have Mr. Foley coming forward. I'm sure he was probably part of the brainchild when he was principal there, and now it's coming to fruition. So he will share some of that detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Unified Physical Education Program is an extension of the Unified Sports Program that they have at Burncoat High School. It promotes social inclusion through team and group activities. Students with and without physical and intellectual disabilities participate in modified games and skills and game development within the same class setting. The relationships established through this program directly supports an all-school inclusive climate. It extends the peer connection beyond the classroom and into other activities, including but not limited to prom, clubs, and other school activities.
And just a follow-up question. So it actually says in there that it's open to students who are able-bodied and students who are disabled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Approve it. Okay. What's that? All those in favor? Opposed? So ordered. Okay. Next up is consider the support and adoption of the Massachusetts Legislative Bill, Senate 340, House 583, an act enabling students to thrive, protecting a high-quality, diverse educator workforce. Member Kamara?
Thank you. So, as I was reading on this bill, or the article that I read that got to this bill, and after my data collection from you, from Melissa, and Brian, I'm not married to this bill. But one of the things that I do want to highlight, and I will continue to highlight, and as I always highlight, is that a report from Johns Hopkins, which detail Black students who have one or more educators, whether that is in elementary school or throughout the education life, in our secondary and education, are more likely to go to college. And what this bill was actually, or entail, also is to look at the linguistic abilities of educators and to protect educators. The bill supports layoff, so a superintendent can lay off if there is reduction in the force or reorganization resulting from declining enrollment or other budgetary reasons. There's also language that talks about collective bargaining in there. And so I wrote a whole long thing. I'm not gonna sit here and read all this stuff now. But I guess what I'm going to with my explanation, having spoken to Brian, with that being said, that as a school committee, we do have policies through the SOA funds, which Brian and I talked about, that it is regulated for the SOA to be able, one of the goals, or the school committee goals within the SOA, is to actually diversify the educator workforce. And so when I spoke with you, I was just concerned about where are we right now as a district, and what are we doing to retain, to hire, retain, and pay our educators an equitable wage. And as I said, I'm not married to this bill, and whether or not folks have different observations, I'm not. But with regards to my conversation with the administration, I will continue to talk on this topic, because I think we need to we need to be robust, and I'm happy to hear from you and some of the items that she's working on, and that this is a focus of her also, because I know that this is certainly a focus of everyone in our district, that relates to the population of our kids and the languages of the different languages that our kids in our public schools speak. So I will continue to speak about this. And having said that, I will like to retract my item. Retracted? Yes, this bill, because there's only two representatives that actually wrote, that attached themselves to this bill, so I'm not too sure if it's going to pass. But in conclusion, what, as a school committee member, what I think I can continue to advocate for is that per our school committee SOA goals, which entails to diversify our educators workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is to withdraw. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered. Next is send a letter of support to our delegation in support of Bill House 1367 that will require students to complete a free application of federal student aid, FAFSA, before they graduate high school. Member Kamara?
Yes. So this one is an important one, and I have two. There's another one that complements that. As I was speaking on with a community person who works in this, in the nature of this capacity, it appears that we as a district in the past year, especially during COVID, we have had low numbers in terms of FAFSA, the completion of FAFSA. And my ideas, I support education, I support college readiness, I support kids who don't want to go to college, so I understand the both stands, and for our district to continue to advocate and show support to those population of kids. And I am aligned with this bill because I'm also advocating that the state, if this bill was to pass, for there to be funding implications to it for the districts that are going to execute this bill. I know across the nation, other states approved this, have this FAFSA bill already approved, and Massachusetts is just one that we're talking about this. So whether this bill is approved at the state level, I think, or not, I think some way, somehow, this is going to be a lingering thing in our district and in Massachusetts as a whole. And again, I care about this because I want for there to be budgetary implications to it, so that it can support the work that we do to be able to help kids, number one, gain the financial literacy that is attached to filling out the FAFSA, that is attached to the implications of what is within the FAFSA for our parents and the kids who are filling this out, to really understand what that is, and to give more opportunities to all kids in our district, especially kids who are first generation or come from underserved populations.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to applaud my colleagues' intention here, because we do know that the statistics around students who fill out the FAFSA are such that they have significantly higher rates of both college attainment and college completion. However, there actually are two issues with the bill that lead me to rise in opposition. The first is that under Massachusetts general law, school committees in Massachusetts actually set graduation standards. The one exception, of course, is that students also have to pass the MCAS. I reflexively oppose any undermining of that school committee authority, and thus us supporting the legislature setting an additional standard, barrier, what have you, under their purview for state graduation is something that I think is well out of line with something that we as a committee should be supporting. More concerningly, the FAFSA cannot be filled out by undocumented students. I double-checked this with the FAFSA website itself. And we know we have undocumented students, although we are also barred, rightfully, from inquiring as to students' immigration status. And thus, we would be creating a situation, if we required the FAFSA for graduation, in which we would be making it impossible for some of our students to graduate. And that, to me, is just simply wrong. So I am making a motion to file this and the item which accompanies it next, Mr. Chair, both in terms of questions of purview, but also in terms of questions of fairness, equity, and frankly, our alliance with federal immigration law. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Member Mailman? No, you're first. Go ahead.
I think she was first, but that's okay. I have a clip. Is this bill that all students will fill out a FAFSA?
Yes.
Yeah, I would object to that just because all kids aren't going to college. So why do that painful exercise if we know we're not going?
Okay,
That would
thank
be
you.
mine. Thank you.
Member Kamara?
Right, so that's what I think I started with my statement, vocational and kids who are going to college. But the bill also details that students, can you hear? That students can, that it was not required, that students or and their guardians or parents can opt out of filling the FAFSA. So there's, within the first few lines of the bill, there are language that supports that.
Okay. Member Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm not even sure where I'm at on this, but my concern is in being a social worker and working with kids, I'm well aware that there's numerous kids who are undocumented. They're working on their citizenship or whatever, in tons of refugee families or whatever that will never do this at all. And I think the other issue with that is I read the opt-out issue is I don't even think they will opt out. Like, so how do we determine that and how do we figure that out? And then the other piece is if there's a kid over 18, a student over 18, they have to do the opting out because they're over 18, they're considered an adult. And when you're dealing with students who may not follow through with that, I just have some concerns around that. So I just wanted to raise that. I don't know how you get around it. You read it, it sounds great, but in theory, I'm not sure that that's practical currently at this time. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we have Member Kamara?
Yeah, thank you. So while I was not undocumented, but I think I was one of those students who was first generation, and I, with the help of why I added my second bill, the second item there, so that there is funding to support organizations or to support a district to do that kind of work, which as a district, we have less organizations helping our kids, whether if it's filling out application for common applications or talking about colleges. I mean, there are some schools that have like Gear Up in North High that have that component of it. There's Upper Bound, there's Avid. But when I was in the district, when I was in the public schools, at those years, we had other organizations that were filling in gaps, and they were shut down. So I guess my statement to that is that I understand the undocumented situations, but I also know that in states that this was passed, they also have undocumented students. So while I am not the writer of this bill, I think our committee members here do pose some interesting comments that will be, if they're watching, they can probably consider. But But I guess to what I'm trying to say here is that my second item corresponds to my first one, and I do, support this bill, and I support the idea of it, and I support the supports that we do continue to offer our kids, our families, and our who are first generation, firstly arrivals in our district, and have to think about college. I think we have to consider all those factors too.
Okay.
But I thank my colleagues for their feedback and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is to file, I believe, 3-111. Is that correct?
And the accompanying one,
On
Mr. Chair.
3-112. Okay. Prior to doing so, we should have Member Kamara speak on that one. What's that?
Thank you. I would like to propose another.
I was going to read it first.
Oh.
Okay. To send a letter to the delegation and push for financial support to accompany the bill House 1367 that would help school districts execute the goals and objectives of the bill, especially school districts where a high number of students are low income, ESL, disability, and on free and reduced lunch, to name a few, in the districts with already low FAFSA completion rates. Member Kamara.
Thank you. Did I forget what I was going to say? Jesus.
What's that?
Did I forget? I think I kind of forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, you already spoke on it, really.
No, okay, thank you. I was going to say that I would like to make another motion, so we have two things. So for those that want to unfile it, but then also I would like to hold my item and get more, because my colleagues raised some questions. So I would like to hold it and maybe get some clarification on that, if that is an option.
Which one is that? 3-112?
Yeah.
You want to hold 3-112?
Yes.
Okay.
Both of them, that's what I'm saying. Both, yeah.
Motion to
So the motion, I think, under the rules is file is first and hold is second, I think?
Yes, motion to file takes
Yeah.
precedent.
Yeah, so we will,
But we didn't vote?
what's that?
Did we vote?
Yeah, we don't have like a hold in the city. You still need 6 or 4 votes to hold. So the first motion is to file both 3-111 and 3-112. Roll call. Okay, before the roll call, I think Member Mailman has a question.
I know. But this could be resubmitted as an item
In 90 days.
in 90 days. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Mara?
You be no, yeah. No.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. I know we have school week off next week, and everybody enjoy their week off. And I think this weekend we have Safe Homes this weekend, a gala, and also the Oddfellows Homes of Sergeant Major Clarence Plant. So enjoy, everybody. See you back in a few Thursdays from now. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor, opposed, so ordered.